Hello, Tar Heel Nation. This is your host, Dan DeWitt of the UNC Hoops Talk podcast. This is not a regular podcast. This is, I guess you say, kind of an ad, a way for me to let you know and be aware of the ways you could support the UNC Hoops Talk podcast. It is something that you listen to and enjoy and want to help improve. Before I let you know all that stuff, on the last podcast, I failed to mention that Dunn had committed to UNC. I didn't really even mention it or talk about it. So I am mentioning it here. It will need to be talked about in a future podcast when we talk about recruits in upcoming years and players and such that. So I did not glance over that. I missed it in my notes for the last podcast. I meant to mention it. So here is that mentioning. But for today, I just hopefully briefly, I don't want this to go too long, but just wanted to let you be aware of where you could support or enjoy the UNC Hoops Talk podcast if you are not connected already. So I say every time, connect with me on Twitter, Instagram, or on YouTube. On Twitter and Instagram, it's at @AllTarHeelDan. They're in the description below the video or below the podcast, however you take the podcast in. But other than that, just so you're aware, we are pretty much everywhere that podcasts are. We are on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, any podcast app that is on your phone, it should be there. If not, let me know and I'll try to get it there. Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio. You can listen on your Echo device, I'm pretty sure. That's something I still need to try out, but it is on Amazon Music, so it should be able to be played on any Echo device throughout your house. So that's audio podcasts that way. We are also on YouTube at youtube.com/UNC Hoops Talk. And we've recently gotten a couple of new subscribers there. And kind of my goal there, it's more of an audio thing. It's just me talking or a guest if we have one that week, each week. So there's not a lot to see on YouTube, but my goal is to get it up past 1,000 so I can do live YouTubes and we can go and be more interactive and kind of like this, but more spontaneous. So I can do it through YouTube. So if you have a second YouTube channel, subscribe to me through there. If you can let anybody know, the easiest way for you to help support the podcast is to just let other Tar Heel fans know. So I do appreciate that. But subscribe at UNC Talk, UNC Hoops Talk, on YouTube. Even if you don't watch there, if you don't use your subscriptions on YouTube much, go subscribe. It helps out so much there. And like I said, I'm trying to get past 1,000 there. And then on Apple Podcasts and really anywhere, any podcast app that you listen to the podcast at, if you subscribe, that obviously helps, but especially on Apple Podcasts, I just wanted to go through. If you leave a review, I will see it. I've been really bad about reading them when people do leave them. So this is already really old from July, Review Master 811, and I promise I didn't pay for this review. I did not. It's not me making up another account or anything like that. But Review Master 811 says, "I love your pod. The only problem is you never post," which I've been really bad during all this COVID stuff and the off season. You need to post once a week. Please, I'd love to hear more pods about your predictions, play mini games, do something, but post more. So Review Master 811, shout out to you. This is me trying to be a little bit better about that. And of course, once the season starts, we do go once a week. This may be a crazy season. We'll see how it goes. But I've always want to pod more. It's just whether there's content to or something to talk about, that kind of stuff. But if you have segments that you'd like me to do in off season, of course, send those in. Again, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, email, they're all in the description below for you to contact and stay in contact with me. But another one from June of this past year says UNC Good 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 is their name. I guess we don't care what our names are on Apple Podcast reviews, but it says, I've listened to every episode and I love it. So thank you. Shout out to you. Another one from the Holy Spirit 1. Great content. And then another one, there's more than this, but going to kind of stop here as we're getting really old then. Durlemke, hopefully I'm saying that name right, says best for Tar Heel Talk. So awesome. Thank you for that. And again, if you leave a review on Apple Podcasts, I will get that And hopefully I do a better job of reading those on air or on the podcast and giving you a little shout out for those. And then the last place that I wanted to kind of share with you that is possible. I don't like to do this a lot. I don't want it to think that I'm asking people for money or anything like that. It's not the reason I'm doing the podcast, but on Patreon, which is patreon.com/UNC Hoops Talk. Again, link will be in the description. If you're watching on YouTube, it's right there on the screen. You can see it. It's patreon.com/UNC Hoops Talk. And this is just kind of a subscription to where you can help improve the podcast. Besides telling people and spreading the word, this is probably the most impactful way to improve it. Obviously, as I bring in more money and put that into the podcast, I'm not trying to make money off the podcast. It's all about putting it back in, making it better, making the audio better, make the video better, make it easier, those kind of things. Plus, hosting the podcast costs money, so just covering those costs. But as little as $1 a month, think about that. $1 a month is all you'd have to do, and would be great. Obviously, more is welcome and appreciated and all that stuff. But we recently had a new patron come on, Liz Hyde on Twitter. She's at LizHyde01. Go give her a follow. Shout out to Liz. But she started donating and, again, helping to improve the podcast and support the podcast. So if that's something you feel you can, obviously these are different times. I'm stumbling here, but again, it's me trying to ask for money and not really ask for money at the same time. But there are perks there. You can go, again, check it out, all the details there. There's different tiers and stuff. But definitely at least check it out and let me know what you think. Give me feedback, all that kind of stuff. I always like to have your guys' feedback. Excuse me, either on Twitter, again, Instagram, YouTube, wherever you guys leave comments. I see them. I appreciate them. I try to respond, and I think I do, unless I completely missed it. But keep giving your feedback. Keep sharing the podcast. It all does well for the podcast and makes me feel good. So that's what we really want, right? But I believe, let me check again my notes really quick so that I don't miss anything. Again, most of this stuff, it all should be linked up in the description. I don't know how many people look at the descriptions of the podcast or on YouTube of the video, but it's all there. There's a link to Patreon. There's links to Apple Podcasts, to Stitcher, and it lists out where it's available. But really, if you just search UNC Hoops Talk on any podcast app, it'll be there. Again, go subscribe on YouTube and just keep supporting the podcast. Let's have the best season we can. Until next time. Go Heels, and thank you.